The message appeared on his screen at 6:12 in the morning, a moment when the world is too quiet for shocks of this size. He recognized her number immediately, but the words did not belong to the woman he once knew. She announced that the savings account was empty and wished him luck as if she were sending a farewell greeting to a stranger. There was no reason, no hesitation, no softness. It was a sentence meant to break a man before he had even left his bed. For a brief second his breath caught, not from fear, but from disbelief at the coldness in her tone. Then something settled inside him. Not panic, not pleading, a sudden and complete clarity. He sat on the edge of the bed and read the message again. The betrayal was clear, yet it felt unfinished. There was something hidden behind the words, something that did not fit her personality. She was impulsive, but never strategic. Emptying an account required planning. It required knowledge. It required help. That last thought lingered as he stood up, dressed calmly, and prepared to drive to the bank. If she wanted chaos, he wanted information. The bank teller greeted him with polite formality, unaware of the storm beneath his composed expression. He handed over his identification and requested a printout of every movement in the previous 24 hours. When the paper slid across the counter, he studied it with the patience of a man who had rebuilt himself before and knew how to remain silent while absorbing pain. The first transfer was hers. The second one was not. A name he recognized appeared beside the transaction. A name he never expected to see involved in something like this. His hand tightened around the paper, not out of anger but out of realization. The betrayal was not only marital. It was personal. The teller asked if he wished to dispute the transactions. He shook his head. He did not need to dispute. He needed to understand. Instead of returning home, he walked to the side office and asked to speak with the branch manager. The manager arrived with a rehearsed smile that faded slightly when he saw the documents on the desk. After a long pause, he confirmed that the second transfer required in-person authorization. That meant someone had walked into the bank, presented their identification, and knowingly assisted in the removal of his money. He felt something shift inside him, not grief but strategy. Whoever helped her had overplayed their hand and stepped into a territory that could not be hidden. He left the bank without raising his voice or making accusations. His calmness attracted the attention of a security guard who watched him with curiosity, expecting visible anger. Instead, he moved with the steady posture of a man who understood that emotional explosions only benefit the guilty. The early sunlight felt sharper as he stepped outside. The day no longer belonged to shock. It belonged to preparation. He drove to a quiet parking lot near an empty cafe and sat alone in the car. He read every line of the printout again and pictured the face behind the second transfer. A friend who had once eaten at his table. Someone he trusted enough to lend tools and advice. He replayed small moments, side comments, lingering looks, and a sudden generosity that now appeared suspicious. Betrayal never falls from the sky. It grows in silence until the roots surface. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. She thought she took everything. She thought she ended the story at dawn. What she truly did was give him the first clue to a larger truth. He was not going to chase her. He was going to follow the shadow behind that second transfer. And that was the real beginning of the war. The bank manager kept his eyes on the printout longer than necessary, as if debating whether to speak the truth or protect someone. His hesitation revealed more than the name itself. When it finally left his lips, the sound struck a deeper place than anger. It was the name of the man who had eaten roasted chicken in his dining room, laughed beside his fireplace, and offered financial advice with the confidence of someone pretending to care. His wife had introduced him as an accountant hired to straighten out their household budgeting. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now it felt like the first chapter of a hidden plan. He left the bank with that name echoing in his thoughts. Betrayal becomes heavier when it comes from someone who once accepted your hospitality. As he drove toward the district where the accountant kept his office, memories resurfaced. A compliment about the size of their savings. An innocent question regarding online banking habits. A comment about how modern couples should have separate accounts. None of it sounded innocent anymore. It formed a trail he had overlooked, a trail that now pulled him forward with a new sense of purpose. The office building was quieter than he expected for a Wednesday morning. The receptionist greeted him with professional politeness, but the moment he mentioned the accountant's name, her shoulders stiffened. She guided him to the second floor where a small suite of glass doors revealed a puzzling sight. Half of the office furniture had been removed. The bookshelves were empty. The desks had been cleared. A plant sat dying in a corner as if forgotten in the rush. It looked like a space abandoned overnight. A secretary stepped out a nearby room and froze when she saw him standing there. Her eyes held recognition, not of him personally, but of the situation. He thanked her calmly and asked whether the accountant was available. For a moment, she stared at him, as if deciding whether to protect her former employer or protect her conscience. Then her voice lowered to a whisper. The accountant had resigned the previous night and instructed the staff not to contact him. He left no forwarding address and no explanation. Only silence. He asked how unusual this was. The secretary hesitated again, then admitted that he had come to work the previous morning looking tense. He made several phone calls behind a closed door, and by afternoon he had begun emptying the office. He worked until late evening, ignored questions, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. The secretary confessed that she heard him say the words "it is done" during one of the calls. She did not know what it referred to, but the fear in his voice had stayed with her. The information deepened the puzzle. If it had been a simple matter of helping his wife transfer money, there would have been no reason for the accountant to disappear. People who act with confidence do not run. People who believe they are protected do not resign abruptly. His departure suggested he feared consequences far larger than a marital dispute. He stepped outside the office building and let the cool air settle his thoughts. The betrayal was not a spontaneous decision between two people sharing a secret. It was part of something planned carefully over time. Someone had given the accountant a reason to flee. Someone had reassured his wife that everything would unfold without risk. Both of them believed he would react with despair rather than investigation. He looked at the empty street and understood something clearly. The stolen money was only the surface. The real threat hid beneath the accountant's disappearance. He was no longer dealing with a broken marriage. He was dealing with a scheme, and the next step was to uncover who created it. The marital home looked untouched when he checked it that evening. Every cushion was where she always placed it. The scent of her perfume lingered softly in the hallway. The kitchen counters were free of dishes, almost staged, as if she wanted the place to look peaceful before walking away. Yet that peace felt artificial, like a curtain hiding a storm. She had always claimed the small apartment across town was only for work meetings and quiet evenings of planning. He never questioned it, because trusting her had once felt natural. Now it felt naive. He drove there without calling anyone. The building was old but secure, with a long corridor that carried every sound. When he unlocked the door, the first thing he noticed was the difference in energy. Their home was clean. This space was chaos. A suitcase lay open on the floor with clothes spilling out, as if she had been packing in a hurry. Another bag sat half-zipped on the couch, filled with expensive shoes he had never seen. Receipts from luxury shops crowded the table. The purchases were recent, chosen with excitement, not guilt. None of them matched the simple lifestyle she had always insisted they maintain. He stepped closer to the table and found a document folded neatly between the receipts. It was a travel itinerary, printed boldly with her name. A one-way ticket to Dubai, leaving in 5 days. The departure date felt like a cold hand closing around his chest. She did not intend to leave quietly. She intended to leave triumphantly, with money she had not earned and a future built on deception. He pictured her imagining a glamorous arrival in another country, free from the life she no longer wanted. The fantasy she created for herself was clear. The mistake she made was believing he would never discover it. He moved through the apartment slowly, taking in the signs of preparation. A new passport cover lay on the coffee table. A list of items to buy was taped to the fridge. Notes about closing accounts and transferring funds were scribbled on a small pad. She had planned everything except one detail. In the corner of the bedroom, partially covered by a jacket, was a thick folder. He picked it up, expecting more receipts. Instead, the first page froze him in place. It was a financial agreement with his name printed clearly at the top, followed by a signature that was supposed to be his. He examined it carefully. The handwriting attempted to mimic his style, but the curves were wrong and the pressure marks were uneven. It was not one document. It was several, tucked together in chronological order, forming a pattern that only made sense when seen side by side. She had been signing his name for months, authorizing loans and transfers he had never approved. Each page carried the weight of potential criminal accusations, all directed at him if she managed to leave the country. He sat on the edge of the bed and let the truth settle around him. She had not simply run away with the savings. She had built a paper trail that made him responsible for financial decisions he never made. If the bank pursued the forged signatures, he would be the one questioned, not her. Her escape plan relied on one belief. He would be too shocked to look deeper, too heartbroken to fight. She underestimated him. He placed the folder on the table and took a long breath. The path ahead was no longer emotional. It was legal. It was strategic. It was about survival. She wanted a new beginning in Dubai. What she left behind was the evidence that would determine whose future would collapse first. Fake signatures meant criminal consequences. The question was simple. Would those consequences fall on the man she betrayed, or on the woman who believed she had already won? The folder felt heavier than its size suggested. He returned to the table in the apartment and opened it fully, determined to understand every page. The first document was a loan agreement with a sum identical to the amount missing from their savings account. His name appeared at the top, followed by a signature that tried too hard to look familiar. The imperfections were unmistakable. The loops were formed by a hand that trembled slightly. She had rehearsed his name, but never mastered it. The realization settled in slowly. The theft was not impulsive. It was planned through a series of deliberate steps designed to make him appear responsible for a debt he had never taken. He sat down, spread the documents across the table, and examined each one like evidence in a case that no one else yet knew existed. The dates revealed a timeline. She had applied for the loan months earlier, submitted the forged forms in person, and transferred the money from the loan into a private account she controlled. The bank had approved the request without questioning the mismatch in signatures because she acted with confidence and provided supporting documents he had never seen until now. The more he read, the clearer the intention became. She wanted to ensure that when she left, he would face the consequences alone. He imagined what would happen if the loan entered default. The bank would contact him first. The documents would be presented as proof. The blame would fall on his shoulders. His credit, his reputation, and possibly his freedom would hang on pages she signed without hesitation. The betrayal was not fueled by emotion. It was a strategy meant to remove him from her future entirely. The thought carried a cold weight that settled deep within him. She did not merely plan a new life. She planned his destruction as part of her departure. He continued reading until he reached a small envelope tucked between two pages. Inside was a sheet containing instructions for transferring funds through multiple channels. The handwriting was not hers. The letters were sharper, more calculated. It belonged to someone who understood financial systems with far more precision. This confirmed what he suspected. She had not created the scheme alone. The man from the bank transfer, the accountant who vanished overnight, had guided her every step. Together, they had constructed a plot that relied on one belief. He would discover the truth too late to defend himself. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the gravity of the situation to settle. Everything she left behind revealed her confidence. She believed the path ahead was clear. She believed he would crumble under the weight of legal accusations. She believed he would react with confusion instead of calculation. Yet the more he learned, the more focused he became. The betrayal no longer cut emotionally. It sharpened him. He knew he needed help, but not from lawyers or institutions. He needed someone who understood her mind better than anyone else. Someone who had once warned him that she was capable of manipulating circumstances to her advantage. Someone he had dismissed because love blinds even the most rational adults. He remembered a quiet conversation that took place months earlier at a family gathering. A cousin of hers had hinted that she had secrets she never intended to share. At the time, he brushed it aside. Now those words returned with startling clarity. He locked the apartment and walked out with the folder under his arm. The evidence inside could protect him or destroy him, depending on how he used it. What mattered now was finding the person who could provide the missing pieces. She trusted very few people, but one of them had once trusted him enough to speak the truth. He was about to confront the only ally she never expected him to seek. The evening carried a heavy quiet when he returned home with a folder under his arm. He placed it on the table and stood in the center of the living room, trying to understand how a marriage could unravel with such calculation. The apartment felt different now. Every room reminded him that she had walked away without hesitation. He knew she was not coming back to explain anything. The truth would have to be uncovered without her. As he prepared to review the documents once more, a sudden knock echoed through the hallway. It was firm, but not aggressive. He hesitated before opening the door. Standing there was her cousin, a man who rarely spoke above a whisper, a man who avoided conflict and family gatherings unless absolutely necessary. His presence on that doorstep felt out of place, especially at that hour. He looked nervous, shifting his weight anxiously, not from fear of confrontation, but from the burden of something he had carried for too long. Without waiting for an invitation, he asked if they could talk inside. His voice trembled in a way that revealed more than his words ever could. They sat at the table, two men connected by the same betrayal, yet standing on opposite sides of its origin. The cousin began slowly, apologizing before even explaining what he came to say. He revealed that he had seen her the previous night. She had been in the company of friends, celebrating her success, waving papers in the air as if she had achieved something grand. She spoke openly about her new beginning, about the money she believed she deserved, and about the man she planned to leave behind without remorse. Every sentence, the cousin recalled, left deeper shadows in the room. He continued with details he had no desire to repeat. She bragged about the accountant who had helped her orchestrate the transfers and the forged loan. She laughed about how easy it was to mimic a signature if one practiced often enough. She described how the bank would hold him responsible for the debt while she started her life elsewhere. The cousin said her voice carried a level of excitement he had never heard from her, the excitement of someone who believed nothing could touch them. Listening to her had left him sick with guilt. He pulled a small envelope from his coat and placed it on the table. Inside were printed messages between her and the accountant. Messages she had shown him proudly, unaware that his discomfort had turned into quiet alarm. There were instructions, references to the loan, and a list of transactions planned weeks ahead. Some messages contained plans for the future, written without any concern for the man she was abandoning. The cousin explained that he took the messages not to betray her, but because something in her tone frightened him. What she intended to do crossed every moral line he respected. He admitted that he spent the entire day debating whether to come forward. His loyalty to her pulled him one way, while his conscience pulled him another. In the end, conscience won. He could not allow her to destroy a man who had always treated the family with respect. He could not stay silent while she carried out a scheme that could ruin more than one life. He apologized again, not for her actions, but for not acting sooner. The room held a tense stillness as the weight of the documents and messages settled between them. For the first time since the morning, he felt a shift from defense to strategy. The betrayal had been exposed by someone she trusted. The evidence was now complete. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. The time for explanation had ended. The time for a counterattack had begun. Sleep did not visit him that night. Instead, he watched the city change from darkness to pale morning light as he reviewed each document again. Every page became a reminder that silence would only make her path easier. By the time the sun rose, he already knew his next step. Waiting for her to trip over her own mistakes was not enough. He needed to protect himself before she reached the airport. He needed someone who understood the weight of forged signatures and the consequences attached to them. At 7 in the morning, he walked into a law office without an appointment, carrying the folder like a shield. The lawyer who received him was older, a man who had seen enough damaged marriages and financial traps to recognize danger immediately. He listened without interruption, his expression sharpening with each page he examined. When he reached the last forged signature, he closed the folder with deliberate calm and said that the situation was more serious than he realized. A forged loan of that value could be overturned, but only if action was taken before the bank processed the next cycle. That meant acting quickly, before she used the money to secure anything in her name. They began with a motion to freeze the loan. The lawyer contacted the bank's legal department and presented the evidence. The forged handwriting, the mismatched dates, the fraudulent authorization forms, and the messages provided by the cousin created a clear pattern. Once the bank understood the risk of proceeding with an illegal loan, they agreed to halt all activity linked to it. No additional funds could be moved. No penalties would be charged until the investigation was complete. Her escape plan began to tear at the seams without her knowledge. Next, they targeted her credit. Every account connected to her recent purchases was flagged for review. The luxury receipts she left in the apartment became useful now. The bank could not allow transactions tied to fraudulent loan money to continue. Her cards were suspended pending verification. Any attempt she made a new purchase would trigger a request for identification. She would have no idea why her transactions suddenly failed. She would assume it was a technical glitch. She would not realize that each failed payment tightened the net around her. The lawyer then moved to freeze any asset tied to the forged signature. Transfers, investments, or withdrawals would immediately alert the bank. This meant that her one-way ticket to Dubai would no longer be a smooth exit. Even if she boarded the flight, her arrival would not provide the fresh start she imagined. The documents she depended on for her new life were now locked in legal limbo. Her plans would stall in midair. He watched all of this unfold with a calm that surprised even him. She believed she had left him with nothing, but the law offered him tools she never expected him to use. She had counted on emotional shock, not strategic action. She built her plan on the assumption that he would crumble. Instead, he had countered her every move before she even reached the airport. The lawyer assured him that the investigation would lean in his favor. Her forged signatures were too obvious. Her messages were too careless. Her disappearance would be interpreted as intent. When he stepped out of the office, the sun was higher, and the world felt different. He had frozen her future legally. She would not see it coming. But as he walked toward his car, another thought formed. He had protected himself. He had stopped her financially. Yet a part of him felt unfinished. The law would reveal her lies, but it would not reveal her motives. The legal battle secured his stability. What came next would address his dignity. His next move would not rely on a legal system. It would be personal. He chose the cafe carefully, a quiet place near the river where strangers rarely paid attention to unfolding drama. The choice was intentional. He wanted a setting that left no room for theatrics or manipulation. When he called her that morning, she answered with a voice dripping with confidence, the voice of someone convinced she had already won. She agreed to meet him within the hour, perhaps curious, perhaps eager to witness what she believed was the collapse she had orchestrated. As he waited, he watched the reflection of morning light on the water and prepared himself for the conversation that would determine the next stage of this battle. She entered the cafe with the posture of a woman stepping into a celebration. Her clothes were immaculate. Her perfume arrived before she did. She sat across from him with a triumphant smile that did not belong in a meeting between a husband and the man she tried to frame. The arrogance in her expression revealed how deeply she underestimated him. She believed this meeting was a final scene where she would dictate the ending. He allowed her to enjoy the illusion for a few seconds before he placed the first folder on the table. She glanced at it casually, still smiling, until he opened it and spread the pages before her. Her eyes traveled slowly from one forged signature to the next. The smile froze. A subtle tension formed along her jaw. She tried to appear unfazed, but her fingers tightened around her cup. He watched her expression shift as she recognized her own handwriting disguised as his. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse her. He simply explained that he knew about the loan, the forged documents, and the transfer she believed would remain hidden. Then he told her something she was not prepared to hear. He said he would not press charges yet. All he required was a written confession. For a moment she stared at him, and then she laughed. The sound was sharp and hollow, the laugh of someone trying to regain control. She leaned back and told him he was bluffing. She said no one would believe him. She insisted that the bank would take her side, that she had done nothing wrong, that he had no proof beyond papers she could claim or fabricated. Her confidence returned like a wave, trying to wash away the truth on the table. She stood up, as if ready to leave, convinced she had turned the situation back in her favor. He let her speak until her arrogance filled the space between them. Then he reached into his bag and placed a second folder on the table. This time her confidence did not hold. She opened it slowly and found printed messages between her and the accountant. Messages where she outlined the plan, celebrated the approval of the loan, mocked the trust he had placed in her, and discussed the date of her departure. Each line revealed intention. Each sentence exposed her motive. The transformation on her face was immediate. Her voice faltered. Her breath shortened. She tried to close the folder, but the words had already escaped into the air around them. The cafe seemed to fall silent despite the murmurs of other patrons. She whispered that the messages were taken out of context. She insisted that the accountant must have framed her. Her excuses came in fragments, none of them consistent. He reminded her calmly that he had no interest in revenge. He only wanted the truth documented before the authorities approached her. Her trembling hands betrayed the fear she tried to hide. When he repeated his request for a written confession, she refused. Her pride would not allow it. She stood up again, ready to walk away and pretend the evidence did not exist. She believed avoidance could protect her. She had no idea that her refusal had just opened the door for a far more powerful truth. The truth he would force to find her. The days following the cafe meeting unfolded with a silence that felt deceptive. She had walked away, believing she still controlled the narrative. She believed the forged signatures could be dismissed, that the messages could be denied, and that his calm posture meant hesitation. In reality, she had only deepened the trap she built for herself. As she tried to ignore the storm gathering around her, someone else was already crumbling under its weight. The accountant vanished from his office, but disappearing physically could not erase digital traces. The bank had questions. His employer had concerns. His name appeared in documents tied to fraudulent activity. Pressure closed in from every direction. It happened late in the evening. His phone vibrated with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was shaky, the tone of a man who had spent days running from consequences that were now catching up. It was the accountant. He did not try to disguise himself or soften his fear. He asked for a meeting in a place where no one would overhear them. Desperation made his request urgent. The accountant believed that coming clean was his only remaining chance to avoid a prison cell. They met in the back corner of a small parking lot near an abandoned warehouse. The accountant stepped out of his car with the posture of someone who had not slept well, carrying a large envelope and a phone that he kept gripping tightly. He apologized immediately, not out of remorse, but out of panic. The bank had frozen the loan. His transactions were under review. His sudden resignation drew suspicion. Every door he knocked on for help remained closed. He understood something critical. She still had time to reinvent herself. He did not. After a few minutes, the accountant opened the envelope and revealed a set of printed messages, transfers, and even voice notes she had sent him during late hours. Her words were direct and confident. She encouraged him to push the loan through quickly. She celebrated each successful step with promises of a luxurious life and financial reward. She told him that once she reached Dubai, everything would fall into place. She described the money as her compensation for years she believed she had wasted. She did not hide her satisfaction at the thought of leaving her husband with debts he did not create. The accountant admitted he believed her at first. She had convinced him they were partners in opportunity. She said the bank would never suspect anything because her husband trusted her blindly. She made the scheme sound like a victimless arrangement. What she never told him was that in her mind, he was disposable. The moment he became inconvenient, he would be sacrificed to protect her escape. When he realized she had left him to deal with legal heat alone, something inside him snapped. He chose survival over loyalty. He handed over everything. Screenshots of conversations, copies of transfer instructions, calendar reminders she sent him regarding dates and deadlines. Even voice recordings where she practiced his signature while joking about how easy it was to fool someone who loved her too much. The evidence painted a clear picture of manipulation. She had used him with the same cold calculation she showed toward her husband. The accountant finally admitted that she never cared about him or the promises she made. She cared only about funding her new life. As he listened, he understood the significance of the confession. Two testimonies now existed, one from the cousin who witnessed her celebrations, and another from a man who helped execute her theft. Together, they formed a truth she could not escape. She believed charm was protection. She believed lies were armor. She believed distance would save her. With the accountant's confession, she had nothing left to hide behind. He held the power to destroy her completely. But he did not move yet. He waited. Waiting would be the step she never saw coming. Her flight was scheduled for late afternoon, a time chosen carefully so she could leave without drawing attention. She arrived at the airport hours earlier, not out of caution, but excitement. The thought of escaping the consequences she created gave her confidence she did not deserve. She moved through the lines with a suitcase full of plans she believed were untouchable. When she reached the counter, she handed over her passport with the relaxed smile of someone who assumed the world worked for her benefit alone. The officer scanned her passport and waited. A quiet beep echoed from the screen, softer than an alarm, but far more dangerous. The officer's expression changed, shifting from routine professionalism to sharp alertness. He asked her to step aside. She tried to laugh it off, insisting there must be a system error. Within seconds, two immigration officers approached and escorted her toward a private room away from curious eyes. Her confidence began to crack. She asked if there was a problem, but her voice lacked its usual certainty. Inside the room, a single file lay on the table. She recognized the first page before they even spoke. It was the loan agreement she forged. The same signature she practiced so many times now stared back at her under harsh fluorescent light. The officers explained that all assets connected to the loan had been frozen. Every purchase she made in the past 48 hours had been flagged. Her credit accounts were locked. The bank reported suspicious activity. She attempted to interrupt, but her words collapsed under the weight of the evidence. The officers opened the next section of the file. It contained messages between her and the accountant. Printed, highlighted, organized. Her plans were no longer a secret whispered in private rooms. They were evidence. The accountant had confessed everything. He provided voice notes. He provided transaction details. He revealed dates, times, and intentions. He explained how she had manipulated him. Her breath shortened as she listened to the summary. She tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. Then came the question that ended her illusion of control. One officer leaned forward and asked her why she attempted to leave the country while under investigation for financial fraud. She searched for an explanation, but no words arrived. Her rehearsed lies suddenly felt too small. Her confidence evaporated, leaving only panic. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. In that moment, she understood that her plan had collapsed before the plane ever left the ground. She was escorted out of the room under supervision. Her passport was confiscated. Her ticket was canceled. She walked through the terminal with the quiet steps of someone stripped of certainty. The world she tried to build in secrecy had crumbled in public. She believed she had outsmarted everyone, yet she had ignored the one truth she never considered. Actions leave trails. Trails lead to consequences, and consequences arrive without warning. Now the truth was no longer a private discovery. It was official, documented, recorded. The law had spoken before he ever needed to. Yet he had taken no revenge. Not yet. He watched everything unfold from a distance, steady and silent. The collapse of her plan was only the first chapter. What came next would define the ending she never predicted. The next steps would change everything for her. He did not rush to confront her after the airport incident. He stayed silent while the investigation unfolded and allowed the events to reveal truth she tried to bury. In the days that followed, she moved through the city like a shadow, avoiding familiar places and faces. Her confidence had evaporated. She no longer walked with the arrogance of someone building a new life. Instead, she carried the weight of a future she could no longer predict. When she finally appeared at his door, she looked smaller, diminished by the collapse of her own choices. She stood in the doorway with trembling hands, unable to meet his eyes. She asked if she could come inside. He stepped aside, not out of affection, but out of courtesy. She looked around the living room as if seeing it for the first time, noticing the simplicity she once mocked. Her voice cracked as she attempted to justify her decisions. She claimed confusion. She claimed pressure. She claimed fear of an unhappy future. Each explanation fell apart before it even reached the end of the sentence. He listened without interrupting. The silence between her words revealed more honesty than the excuses she offered. When she finished speaking, she waited for anger that never arrived. Instead, he told her calmly that he had no desire to humiliate her. He had no intention of posting messages or calling relatives. He felt no need for theatrical revenge. Her actions had already shaped the path she would walk. Nothing he said or did could make that truth heavier than she had made it herself. She looked at him with disbelief, expecting shouting and punishment. Instead, she found a man shaped by clarity. Betrayal had carved away the parts of him that once sought validation. Only steadiness remained. She whispered an apology, but it sounded hollow, not because she did not feel regret, but because her regret arrived too late to matter. He had already reorganized his life emotionally and mentally. The betrayal no longer controlled his thoughts. He had processed it, understood it, and released it. The release did not free her. It freed him. She realized this and began to cry, the recognition crashing over her. He walked her to the door with the same calm he carried all week. She begged for another chance, promising change and honesty. She offered explanations for every signature and every lie. She tried to paint herself as a victim of her own impulses. Her words fell quietly on the floor between them. He explained that closure was all he wanted. Not reconciliation, not revenge. Closure meant acknowledging truth and walking away from it without looking back. When she stepped outside, she turned to face him again, desperate for even the smallest sign that there was hope. He simply told her that some actions rewrite the future permanently. She had chosen her future the moment she forged his name. He had chosen as the moment he stopped needing her apology. She left slowly, unsure of where to go now that her plans had collapsed and her safety net was gone. He closed the door gently, not as a statement, but as an ending. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace settle over the house. Revenge had never been necessary. Life delivered the consequences she created. He did not need to lift a hand to destroy her illusions. The truth had done the work for him. What remained was a decision he alone could make. The decision that would define the final chapter of this conflict and reveal a choice she never expected from the man she had underestimated. The weeks that followed unfolded with a calm that felt unfamiliar at first. He no longer chased explanations or questioned motives. He allowed the legal process to move at its own steady rhythm. The officers gathered evidence. The bank completed its investigation. The lawyer guided him through each step without pressure or urgency. He made a decision early on that changed the entire outcome. He refused to let anger dictate his next move. Instead, he treated betrayal as a lesson carved into the foundation of his future. This shift created a quiet strength inside him, the kind that does not rely on spectacle to be seen. Her confession came after several meetings with her own lawyer. She resisted at first, insisting on misunderstandings and emotional stress. Yet the evidence was undeniable. When she realized that denial only prolonged the inevitable, she finally agreed to sign a written confession. The signature looked different from the ones she forged. It carried hesitation. It carried fear. It carried the weight of a plan that had crumbled before it even began. She repaid every cent of the stolen money, not from luxury funds or secret accounts, but from loans she had to take under strict supervision. The repayment stripped her of comfort, but the confession stripped her of pride. He withdrew the complaint only after the conditions were fulfilled in full. His decision was not rooted in compassion. It was rooted in closure. Keeping the case open would have tied him to her story longer than necessary. Releasing it freed him from being a character in her narrative. She left the region soon after, unable to face the people who had watched her fall from her self-constructed pedestal. Her departure was quiet, lacking the arrogance she once wore like a crown. She carried her choices like a shadow that followed her into every new city, every new attempt to reinvent her life. Meanwhile, his world changed in subtle and powerful ways. People who once knew him only as a quiet husband now saw a man who navigated betrayal without losing dignity. His colleagues treated him with newfound respect. Friends who had kept their distance during the chaos returned with sincere offers of support. He accepted their presence without bitterness. The experience had taught him that true character is revealed not in moments of joy, but in moments of collapse. He rebuilt his circle carefully, welcoming people who valued transparency and maturity. At home, he found a new sense of peace. He rearranged the furniture, not because it needed changing, but because the space deserved a fresh beginning. He opened the curtains each morning to let sunlight in, a quiet reminder that clarity grows in places once darkened by deception. The apartment no longer felt like a reminder of loss. It felt like a place reclaimed. He spent more time walking through the city, rediscovering routines he had abandoned during the storm. The simple act of choosing his own path without weighing her reactions gave him a freedom he had forgotten existed. The final twist of the story arrived quietly, without confrontation or applause. It was not that she lost the money. Money can be replaced, repaid, reinvented. What she lost carried a deeper consequence. She lost access to the man who once would have forgiven her. She lost the chance to return to a heart that had been steady and loyal. She underestimated how deeply betrayal transforms a person. She expected anger. She expected revenge. She never anticipated growth. He did not celebrate her downfall. He celebrated his rebuilding. He understood now that the strength he found did not come from the collapse of their marriage, but from the rediscovery of himself. When he closed the final chapter of their shared story, he did so without regret. She had written her ending. He had rebuilt his beginning. And that was the true victory.